November 5th, 2024, Election Day in the United States. And if you're tuning in from the States, you know just how pivotal this is. Today, the office of the president is at stake. For my U.S. listeners, if you haven't voted yet, let this be your inspiration to get out there. And if you already have, stick around. Today's episode might just confirm if you made the right choice. If you're enjoying this channel, follow The Backgrounder for deep dives into right-wing politics, the far right, revolutionary movements, political ideologies, and the rise of China. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Hey everyone, welcome to the Backgrounder Podcasts. I'm your host, and today we're going to talk about something that honestly changed my entire perspective on American democracy. You know that feeling when you discover your house has some serious security flaws and you lie awake at night wondering if you're safe? That was me after January 6th, 2021. But here's the thing. I've spent the last few months digging into what's changed since then, and I've got to tell you, it's actually giving me hope. Real, substantial hope, not the wishful thinking kind. I remember exactly where I was during the Capitol attack. I was glued to my screen, watching in horror as everything unfolded. But what I didn't know then, what most of us didn't know, was that the violence we saw was just the visible part of a much larger, more sophisticated attempt to overturn an election. Let me take you behind the scenes of what was actually happening. There was this plan. They called it Operation Green Bay Sweep. Yeah, they named it after a football play, which would be funny if it wasn't so serious. The idea was to run an end around on democracy itself. But here's where it gets interesting, and why I'm actually optimistic about our future. The plan had two main parts, what I call the Hearts and Minds campaign and the legal strategy. The first part was about convincing millions of Americans that the election was stolen. The second part, that was about exploiting every possible legal loophole to actually make that fiction a reality. But here's the thing that keeps me up late reading court decisions. And trust me, I've read way too many lately. Both of those strategies relied on vulnerabilities in our system that no longer exist. Let me explain why. First, let's talk about the Hearts and Minds campaign. Remember all those wild claims about voting machines and Italian satellites? The people spreading those stories thought they were untouchable. Turns out they weren't. When Dominion Voting Systems sued Fox News for defamation, something remarkable happened. Fox had to pay $787 million with an M to settle. That's not just a slap on the wrist, that's a knockout punch. And it wasn't just Fox, One America News, Newsmax, all these outlets that were spreading election lies. They've had to issue retractions, make apologies, and in some cases, face bankruptcy. You know what happened in the 2022 midterms? When some candidates started crying fraud, these same media outlets suddenly got very quiet. Funny how the threat of financial ruin can change editorial policies. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is the part that I think deserves more attention. The legal strategy they tried to use in 2020? It's dead. Not just wounded, not just weakened, dead, and it died in the Supreme Court, of all places. Let me break this down because it's fascinating. There was this legal theory called the independent state legislature doctrine. Sounds boring, right? But it was basically a constitutional loophole big enough to drive a truck through. The idea was that state legislatures had this special, almost magical power to control federal elections, free from any oversight by state courts or even their own state constitutions. Think about what that means for a second. If you're a state legislature and you don't like how your voters voted, this theory said you could just change the rules after the election, and nobody, not your state Supreme Court, not your governor, not even your own state constitution, could stop you. But here's the beautiful part. In a case called Moore v. Harper, the Supreme Court just killed that theory. Dead. 6 justices, including conservatives, said absolutely not. They said state legislatures are part of the constitutional system, not above it. And while all this was happening in the courts, Congress wasn't sitting idle. They took that old, confusing law called the Electoral Count Act, the one that almost let January 6th succeed, and they fixed it. They didn't just patch it, they rebuilt it from the ground up. Under the old rules, it only took one senator and one representative to object to a state's electoral votes and throw everything into chaos. Now, you need 20% of both chambers even to raise an objection. That's like going from needing 2 people to agree to rob a bank to needing a small army. But here's the part that really gets me excited. These aren't just isolated changes. They work together. Think about it. The media can't spread election lies without facing massive lawsuits. State legislatures can't override their voters without facing their courts. And Congress can't be manipulated into overturning an election by a handful of bad actors. It's like we've built a 3-layer security system for democracy. Each layer backs up the others. If one fails, the others are still there. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. What about political violence? What about the people who are so convinced the system is rigged that they're willing to storm the Capitol again? And you're right, that's still a real threat. No law can immediately fix that level of distrust and anger. But here's the thing. When you make it impossible to overturn an election through legal means, when you make it financially ruinous to spread election lies, you start to drain the swamp that breeds that kind of violence. It doesn't happen overnight, but it happens. I've spent countless hours reading these court decisions, studying the new laws, talking to election experts. And I can tell you, for the first time since January 6th, I'm sleeping better at night. Not because the threat is gone, it isn't, but because we've finally built real defenses against it. This isn't just about Trump or 2024 or any single election. This is about whether American democracy can survive and adapt in the face of new threats. And based on everything I've seen, the answer is yes. We're stronger now than we were in 2020. We're better prepared. We're more resilient. So next time someone tells you American democracy is doomed, tell them about Morva Harper. Tell them about the new Electoral Count Act. Tell them about those massive defamation settlements. Because while democracy will always face threats, we're finally building the armor it needs to survive. That's all for today's episode, but we will be back with more. Till then, keep listening and enjoying the Backgrounder podcasts, your one-stop shop of becoming a political junkie. Bye-bye.